I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
China, you say?
Yeah.
Vehicles, like other vehicles, are able to have a lot of our data, our GPS location, they sync with our phones. Are you comfortable with the Chinese government having access to that information from, say, yourself if you drove one of these?
Of course.
Less than a year ago, you said that China was the biggest security threat to Canada. Do you still believe that?
Oh my God, so flip-flopper here, Mark Carney is sending in the goon, Minister Joly. She is a wreck. Let's check it out. What a mess.
Sets us up well for the new world order.
Let's see if Raquel Dancho can get some answers out of this dimwit. Melanie Joly.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Minister, for being with us today. In September 2024, when you were Foreign Affairs Minister, you imposed a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. You called it an EV surtax order because, and I quote, increasing Chinese EV imports are expected to undermine the growth and development of the Canadian EV industry and other comparable vehicles. That's what you said in the Gazette. Then, of course, as you know, 15 months later, in January 2026, you struck a deal with China to allow 49,000 Chinese EVs into Canada at a much lower tariff rate. So really, I'm reading this and thinking that you've made a deal with China that directly undermines the Canadian auto industry. That's really in your own words, based on your assessment from September 2024. So I'm deeply concerned about this. I'm trying to figure out why you aren't.
Well, things happened since and the trade war started. And our North American market was disrupted by 25% tariffs. And so in these circumstances, what did we do? We made sure that we were able to get a good deal. If I may just ask a follow-up there.
I'll just finish. I'm just not clear how importing.
So, colleagues, I'm
not clear how.
Here's what this happened last time, so I'm gonna suggest we take the same route, which I think worked. I'm not going to hold the clock against you, Madame Dancho, to allow the minister to reply at a length similar to your question, and the same will be true the other way around. So we don't need to fight the clock here. The purpose is for us to have a thorough discussion. So, Minister, I'll give you about 20 seconds there to reply, and Madame Dancho, I've pressed pause and I won't resume the clock until the minister is finished.
With China, in order to make sure that our farmers, including in Mr. Falk and Ted's writing, would be able to continue to export their canola to China, and also our fishers in Atlantic Canada be able to export their produce to China in exchange of a small 2.6% quota of EVs coming from China, and that is similar to the 2023 contingent of cars.
Thank you, Minister. It's actually not small when you compare to how many EVs overall were sold in 2023. It's not small at all. In fact, it represents quite a large percentage of EVs sold in Canada before you put that tariff on them. But you mentioned again that bringing them in would put unwarranted downward pressure on pricing, challenging the profitability of Canadian producers, and reduce choice by crowding out other imports. So again, I'm just not clear how this is good for competition in Canada when you're importing a heavily subsidized car that we can't hope to compete with. How does this help our auto sector?
Well, you know, when you look at it, the cars that have been coming in are mainly Teslas, Polestars made by Volvo, Ford. So that's just a reality because the Western OEMs, so Western car makers, have also joint ventures and have been producing in China as well. And so that's the case across the world. We were able to limit that amount of cars in exchange of support to our farmers and fishers. And at the same time, we've made clear conditions that basically, I'll just finish my sentence, in order for Chinese car companies be able to do joint ventures with Canadian car companies here at home to basically build in Canada.
Again,
Smash the like, hit subscribe. We work really hard at this stuff. Let's get back to the video.
A year and a half ago, you said in black and white that this was going to undermine our Canadian auto sector. And now here we are, you're bringing in almost 50,000 annually. But I also want to talk about how the Americans recently launched a Section 301 investigation into Canada and other countries over failure to enforce forced labor. I'm sure you're very familiar with the forced labor concerns. It was, in fact, your government that passed a law to stop forced labor. But of course, we've heard from testimony at this committee and others that aluminum, for example, is being used, is using forced labor from the Uyghurs. I'm quite concerned, as I know others are, that this could jeopardize our trade negotiation with the Americans. Are you concerned?
We have applicable laws regarding forced labor. We have an entire regulatory process. We have a private members bill that passed a couple of years ago that is applicable, and we'll follow it.
But again, it seems to be that Uyghurs are being forced. There's forced labor here that are making these automobiles that you're willing importing into Canada. And actually, that was one of the issues you cited 15 months ago of why you didn't want to do this. And I think I'll just quote Margaret McQuigg Johnston, who said that Canadians don't want to be driving cars made by slaves. Would you agree?
Of course.
Then why is it that you're allowing the imports of 49,000 cars that may in part be made by modern slave labor?
First and foremost, what we will do is when it comes to forced labors, we will address that through legislation, period. And my colleague that is in charge of public safety is in charge of the CBSA. And they need to do their job first. Second, when it comes to protecting our auto workers, because I think that's your point, our auto workers are protected in this deal because there are 3 conditions for any joint ventures with Chinese auto companies. First, labor standards. Second, making sure that we protect our localized supply chain. And at the same time, third, it's the entire security of the software. So we have an entire approach that is very holistic that will be protecting auto workers while bringing in really good technologies. And at the same time, what we want is affordability. I know that the Conservative Party, as the Liberal Party, as the Bloc Québécois, we're all in favor of affordability. These cars will be affordable.
Thank you. I hope you're right, because as you know, the Americans have threatened a 25% tariff on all goods if they find a country such as ours is importing
I think when it comes to the Americans,
labor.
dear colleague,
we're quite
we don't
concerned
need to
that these actions are going to allow it to get worse. But I'll go to my last question, if I may. Certainly regarding security concerns, I also know you're familiar with this. Electric vehicles, like other vehicles, are able to have a lot of our data, our GPS location. They sync with our phones. Are you comfortable with the Chinese government having access to that information from, say, yourself if you drove one of these?
Well, when it comes to also the security of software, my colleague Minister of Transport is working on a regulatory framework when it comes to protecting people's data in their cars. So I'll make sure that I'll work with him to improve that regulatory framework and also protect Canadians.
That needs to be done
and
before we brought them
I
in,
just
though.
wanted to answer the question regarding the threats by the Americans to our auto workers. We won't accept them, and we won't be threatened. Period.
It's not just our auto workers, it's all of our goods.
Thank you, Madame Dancho.
Canada's broken, and Canada's broken because we're stupid.
Actually, I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
China, you say?
Yeah.
WTF.